For decades, we believed in a simple story about who we are. A story told in textbooks and museums, a neat line of ancestors, stretching from primitive apes to modern humans, each generation a little smarter, a little taller, a little more like us. It was a comforting story, the kind that made sense of our place in the world. But what if that story is wrong? What if the ancient skulls once celebrated as the very roots of humanity were never truly our ancestors at all? Take the Kabwe skull discovered in Zambia more than a century ago. For generations, scientists believed it was 500,000 years old, an early African ancestor, bridging the gap between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. Yet new dating techniques have shaken that belief to its core. When researchers applied uranium series and electron spin resonance directly to the bone, the result was startling: only about 299,000 years old. That means this skull, once thought to predate our species, is almost the same age as the oldest known Homo sapiens fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco. In other words, this so-called ancestor may have walked the earth at the same time as the earliest members of our own kind. And that changes everything. For much of the 20th century, the dominant model of human origins was linear and tidy. A species known as Homo heidelbergensis, sometimes divided into African representatives called Homo rhodesiensis, was seen as the direct forebear of modern humans. It fit a pattern that felt reassuring: Africa as the cradle of mankind, a single evolutionary thread weaving unbroken toward us. But in recent years, that picture has unraveled. Radiometric dating, facial morphology, and the growing power of ancient DNA have revealed a far more tangled past. What once appeared to be a single trunk now looks like a braided river of many channels, populations diverging, reconnecting, and overlapping across time and continents. The evidence from Kabwe Bodo and other African fossils no longer fits the clean ancestral line. Their faces are too massive, their brows too heavy, their development too different from ours. Meanwhile, fossils in Morocco, Ethiopia, and even China whisper of earlier, subtler beginnings, faces already reshaped toward what we recognize in the mirror today. In this story, we'll travel through those discoveries. We'll see how a single date, a few 100,000 years, can rewrite our understanding of what it means to be human. This is not just about bones and measurements. It's about humility, about listening to what the past truly says. Because sometimes, to understand who we are, we must first accept that the story we've been telling ourselves might have been wrong all along. Imagine a dusty mining field in Zambia. The year is 1921. The air hangs thick with heat and the sound of iron on stone. A group of workers are breaking through layers of limestone when one of them strikes something hard, smoother than rock, rounded, like no stone could ever be. He bends down, brushes away the dirt, and uncovers the face of a skull staring silently back at him. That single moment, buried in the noise of a colonial mine, would echo through a century of science. It was the Kabwe skull, also known as the Broken Hill Man, a fossil that would forever shape the way we tell the story of our own beginnings. For decades, the Kabwe skull was celebrated as a cornerstone of human ancestry. It looked ancient and powerful, with its heavy brow ridge, its wide nose, and its thick bone walls. At first glance, it seemed older than modern humans could possibly be. Early researchers guessed it might be as much as 500,000 years old, a perfect bridge between Homo erectus, the upright walker, and Homo sapiens, the thinker. It fit the story everyone wanted to believe, a neat evolutionary ladder leading steadily toward us. But science has a way of humbling even our most confident stories. Nearly a century after Kabwe's discovery, new technologies returned to this fossil and asked a simple question: how old is it really? Using uranium series and electron spin resonance methods that measure radioactive decay directly from the fossil's own minerals, scientists produced a shocking answer. The skull was not 500,000 years old. It was about 299,000 years old, give or take 25,000. That number might seem small, a mere detail in deep time, but it shattered the old timeline. Because 299,000 years ago, modern humans already walked the earth. Our oldest known Homo sapiens fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco date to around 315,000 years ago. The Florisbad skull from South Africa sits at about 259,000 years, and the Homo eye remains in Ethiopia are at least 233,000 years old. These are not distant ancestors. These are early versions of us people, with faces you might recognize with rounded skulls and higher foreheads, with smaller, softer features that hint at the humanity we know today. Kabwe, on the other hand, does not look like us at all. Its brow ridge is enormous and unbroken, a solid bar of bone shadowing deep-set eyes. Its forehead slopes back low and long, the opposite of the vertical dome of a modern skull. The face juts forward, broad and muscular, built for powerful chewing. Next to it, the faces from Jebel Irhoud and Florisbad appear refined with clear canine fossae beneath the cheeks and subtle curves instead of angular bones. Kabwe is the face of a survivor from an older world, clinging to the habits and forms of its ancestors, even as a new species was beginning to take shape. And that realization forces us to rethink the story. If Kabwe lived alongside early modern humans rather than before them, then it cannot be our direct ancestor. It must have been part of another lineage, one that branched off and persisted in Africa while our own line was already evolving its distinct shape. For so long, the assumption had been that Africa's Middle Pleistocene hominins formed a single chain, one species, gradually turning into another. But the new dates tell a different tale, one of coexistence, of diversity, of complexity. Picture Africa around 300,000 years ago. It is not the singular cradle of one species, but a vast and varied continent alive with many kinds of humans. In the north, people at Jebel Irhoud strike stone flakes into tools more delicate than any seen before. Far to the south, the Florisbad hominin leaves traces of habitation near watering holes that still shimmer under the African sun. And in the center of the continent near Kabwe, another group hunts and crafts, their faces broader, their skulls heavier, their lineage ancient but not yet gone. Each population carries its own blend of old and new traits, a mosaic of evolution unfolding simultaneously, not sequentially. This mosaic view doesn't make human history simpler. It makes it deeper, more alive. Instead of a single unbroken chain, we see a web populations adapting to their own landscapes, sometimes meeting, sometimes exchanging genes, and sometimes vanishing without a trace. It means our ancestry is not a straight line rising upward, but a braided river flowing through time, some streams merging, others fading into the sand. To grasp this is to feel both wonder and humility. Because if Kabwe was not our ancestor, it was still our cousin. It looked up at the same stars, breathed the same air, and perhaps even saw the same fires flicker on the horizon. It tells us that being human has never meant being singular. It has always meant being part of something larger, a family of species each carrying its own story through the ages. When we hold the Kabwe skull today with its heavy brows and ancient grin, we are not just touching stone or bone. We are listening to a voice that has been silent for hundreds of thousands of years, a voice that says, "I was here too." A voice reminding us that the past is not a ladder of progress, but a chorus full of branches, harmonies, and echoes still resonating in us now. The camera fades from the dusty heat of Kabwe's mine to the cool, sterile glow of a modern laboratory. Glass cabinets reflect white light across a table where ancient bones rest on foam supports. In the middle of the room stands Dr. Chris Stringer at the Natural History Museum in London, a man who has spent his life listening to what fossils try to say. Before him, two faces from different worlds sit side by side, the reconstructed skull of the Kabwe hominin and a cast of an early Homo sapiens from Jebel Irhoud. They stare at each other across the table like distant relatives meeting for the first time. To the untrained eye, both seem unmistakably human. But to a scientist, the differences speak volumes. The face of Homo sapiens is short and tucked beneath the brain case. It has a small hollow under the cheekbone, a feature called the canine fossa, where light and shadow play across soft curves. Its brow ridge is segmented, broken into gentle arches above each eye, and the forehead rises steeply, giving space for the modern brain to expand forward. It's a face that looks inward as much as outward, a face shaped for expression, communication, and subtlety. Now look at Kabwe. The brow ridge forms a solid bar of bone that runs unbroken from temple to temple, like a visor. There is no canine fossa, no indentation, softening the middle of the face. The cheekbones jut forward, the nose is broad and strong. The skull is long and low, its forehead swept backward, as if the face itself were pulling the head into the past. If Homo sapiens carries the look of thought, Kabwe wears the look of endurance, thick, powerful, unyielding. These contrasts are more than skin deep. They tell a story written in the microscopic architecture of bone. In modern humans, the midface develops through a process. Scientists call resorption. Bone is actually dissolved away beneath the eyes and along the sides of the nose, causing the face to retreat inward under the brain case. In older species like Bodo or Kabwe, the opposite occurs. Their faces grow by deposition, the laying down of new bone on the surface, pushing the midface outward. One system subtracts the other, adds. To transform a Bodo-like skull into a modern one would mean reversing an entire developmental program that has operated for hundreds of thousands of years. It's not impossible, but it would require evolution to rewrite its own blueprint, a leap far greater than a few new genes or chance mutations. That is why Stringer and many of his colleagues now see these African Middle Pleistocene fossils not as our direct ancestors, but as cousins on a neighbouring branch. Humans who shared our world, our tools, maybe even brief encounters, but not our destiny. Their faces belong to a lineage that paralleled ours, shaped by different pressures, diet, climate, perhaps the demands of powerful chewing, or the challenges of life in dry savannas. Functionally, those massive features worked. A big brow ridge helped anchor chewing muscles. A projecting midface improved breathing in arid air. Yet evolution was already experimenting elsewhere, with a different design, lighter, subtler, more refined. That other path might have begun even earlier than Africa's famous fossils. In central China, near the village of Yunxian, two skulls more than 700,000 years old were recently reconstructed using modern imaging. Despite their age, their faces are surprisingly flat and compact, closer in shape to Homo sapiens than to Kabwe or Bodo. This so-called Yunxian-like ancestor hints that the blueprint for the modern human face may have roots deeper and broader than we once imagined, stretching across continents and eons. It suggests that the evolution of our face was not a sudden invention but a slow choreography of subtle changes happening in different populations, sometimes far apart, sometimes in contact, all contributing pieces to what would one day become us. Think about what that means. A face, just a few millimeters of bone, a curve beneath the eye, a ridge above the brow, can capture hundreds of thousands of years of history. Every contour is a sentence in an ancient language of biology, recording how our ancestors chewed, breathed, smiled, and survived. In Kabwe, that language speaks of strength and endurance. In Homo sapiens, it whispers of adaptability and imagination. As the lights dim in Stringer's lab, the two skulls still face each other across the table. Between them lies not just time but transformation, the long, intricate journey from bone that pushes outward to bone that folds inward, from survival to self-awareness. It's easy to think of evolution as a ladder, each rung leading higher, but the truth is closer to art than architecture. Our faces are mosaics built from experiments that succeeded and others that faded. And each fossil, each difference, is a brushstroke on that unfinished canvas. In the end, perhaps the story of our face is the story of humanity itself, a quiet reshaping generation after generation, until one day the reflection in the water finally looked back and recognized itself. The story now stretches far beyond Africa. Across deserts, mountains, and frozen plains, new faces emerge, faces carved from the same lineage but shaped by different worlds. The line that once seemed to begin and end in Africa now spreads into a vast web connecting continents and millennia. Each branch carries its own echo of humanity, its own experiment in what it meant to be human. In northern China, the Harbin skull, nicknamed Homo longi, the dragon man, was pulled from the Songhua River, dark and massive, its features both familiar and alien. The skull is huge, with a wide nasal cavity and cheekbones that flare gently outward instead of jutting forward. It's an extraordinary blend of strength and refinement. Many researchers now believe Haben may represent an Asian branch related to the mysterious Denisovans, an ancient people whose DNA still lingers in modern populations across Asia and the Pacific. Thousands of miles away in central China, the Yunxian 2 fossils tell another story. Though over 900,000 years old, their faces are surprisingly flat, lacking the heavy ridges we see in Kabwe or Neanderthals. They whisper of something proto-modern, as if evolution were sketching the blueprint for Homo sapiens long before the species itself emerged. From Africa to Eurasia, the fossils form a complex geography of kinship. Each discovery, Haben Yunshan Dali Nanjing, adds another tile to a global mosaic. The deeper we look, the clearer it becomes that the origin of modern humans cannot be confined to a single cradle. Instead, it resembles a network of populations spread across vast regions, connected by threads of migration and moments of contact. There was no single birthplace of humanity. There were many hearths, many fires, each burning with its own light. And within that web ran the hidden rivers of our DNA. Ancient genetic data has revealed that the lineages leading to modern humans and Neanderthals split far earlier than once thought, somewhere between 550 and 765,000 years ago. That means by the time Kabwe and his kin walked the earth, our branch and the Neanderthal Denisovan branch had already gone their separate ways for hundreds of millennia. Yet the separation was never complete. These populations met again and again, interbreeding in ways both fleeting and profound. Fragments of their genes live on inside us today. In every cell, traces of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA mingle with our own silent witnesses to ancient meetings that shape the biology of our species. And there are other ghosts in our genome, shadows of lineages we have never named. Studies of people from West Africa reveal genetic signatures that don't match any known group. They come from archaic humans who left no fossils, no tools, just molecular whispers woven into the double helix of living people. It's called ghost introgression, a haunting term for a simple truth. Even when entire branches vanish from the fossil record, their legacy can remain alive inside us. Evolution, it seems, is not just about who survived, but about who merged, who left a trace of themselves in others. If we could see our ancestry as a diagram, it wouldn't be a tidy tree with neat branches. It would look more like a braided river, channels splitting and rejoining, carrying sediments from one bank to another, constantly reshaping the landscape of humanity. Neanderthals, Denisovans, archaic Africans, early sapiens. Their streams crossed and mingled, forming the genetic delta that became us. But ancestry isn't only written in DNA, it's also written in culture. For years, archaeologists believed that sophisticated stone tools from Africa's Middle Stone Age belonged exclusively to Homo sapiens, that innovation was the signature of our species. Now, new evidence challenges that idea. At sites associated with archaic humans like Kabwe, researchers have found tools nearly identical to those made by early modern humans. It seems intelligence and creativity were not the monopoly of one lineage. Different groups, separated by anatomy, but united by need and imagination, may have shared similar technologies, proof that culture itself can flow across boundaries just as genes do. And then there's Homo naledi, deep in the South African cave system, known as Rising Star. Small-bodied with a brain, barely a third the size of ours, Naledi lived roughly between 335 and 236,000 years ago, overlapping in time with both Kabwe and early sapiens. Recent discoveries hint that these tiny humans may have intentionally buried their dead and carved symbols into cave walls, behaviors once thought unique to us. If confirmed, it would mean that consciousness, memory, and ritual were not singular gifts, but shared sparks scattered among many branches of humanity. Perhaps that is the most humbling revelation of all. We are not the pinnacle of evolution, but part of a long continuum of beings who looked at the world with curiosity and courage. Maybe the first flicker of compassion, the first spark of creativity, did not ignite in one skull, but in many across Africa, Asia, and beyond. It was a fire kindled and rekindled, passed hand to hand through generations of species. And that flame still burns in us. The way we wonder, the way we question, the way we reach for meaning, it may all be the inheritance of many forgotten cousins, who in their own quiet ways helped light the path that led to today. For more than a century, the Kabwe skull and its kin stood at the center of humanity's origin story. They were cast as the ancestors, the link between primitive and modern, between the beast and the thinker. But today we know that story is incomplete. Homo heidelbergensis and Homo rhodesiensis were not our direct forebears. They were side branches of a great and tangled tree, a family of humans who shared the world with us, yet followed their own paths into extinction. What we see now is not a ladder of progress but a braided river flowing through time. Each branch, each current carried its own version of humanity. Some merged again, leaving traces in our DNA. Others faded away, their voices silenced but never lost. The bones in museum cases, the genes inside our cells, the tools buried in the dust, they all whisper the same truth. The story of us was never written by a single species. It was composed by many hands, many minds, across continents and ages. And maybe that is what makes it so profoundly human. Evolution, after all, isn't the triumph of the strongest or the smartest. It's the memory of survival of lives that met, mingled, and changed one another. Every fossil is a memory, every genome a conversation between past and present. We carry within us the echoes of those who came before, their endurance, their creativity, their capacity for wonder. Our blood remembers what our minds have forgotten. The lesson is both scientific and deeply human. To understand who we are, we must listen to bones, to data, to new discoveries that challenge old beliefs. Because truth in science is not carved in stone. It's alive, changing, expanding with every new clue. It asks us to be humble, to question, to let go of certainty. Each time we do, the story of humanity grows a little richer, a little more complete. So tonight, as you imagine that ancient world, see the firelight flicker on the faces of our many ancestors. Watch the shadows dance across heavy brows and soft cheeks from Kabwe to Jebel Irhoud, from Bodo to Harbin, from the forgotten caves of Africa to the frozen valleys of Siberia. Then watch that fire reflect on your own skin, your own eyes, and remember those lights are the same. We are not the product of one lineage, one people, or one moment in time. We are the harmony of countless lives that once loved, dreamed, and vanished. They are not just history, they are us.